Well, hello there, everyone. Here's Stuart right here talking about QR codes right here. And I'm sure most of us are familiar with like the QR codes, right? But still, what I'm showing everybody here is like a little demonstration right here of like a QR code right here. And to me though, it's just like it looks at the symbols and all that would look just a little bit similar to where if you're going to be rolling the dice, right? And like anybody might even say that, well, really, that whenever you do scan a QR code, it's supposed to be another way of how to be able to identify a web page or something like that, right? So a lot of times when we do think about that, and I want to know too that what's a good example of how to describe a QR code, and everybody else might even say that, well, a QR code, the QR code, of course, is it another way of how you want to call like a type of language, and I guess you could say is toward that, really that do we want to look at it as a source of language, or do we want to kind of look at it maybe just a little bit like a stamp, like if you're going to be using a digital like a little like like a microscope or something like that, to where you're able to pull up so much information just by using it, this source of digital bookmark right here. So in a lot of ways, it sure seems that way. Same way with the printers too. That when we do look at a QR code, a lot of times it's usually something kind of like this. It looks something similar like a stamp though. But I'm just going to show everybody here of this. I'm going to go ahead and just draw a line, and it could also be like what you call something like a zigzaggy type line. But then also think about it is to where whenever you do draw a line and thinking is to where how straight do you think that line usually is whenever it comes to understanding about about trying to get something to work, especially. So at the time it sure seems that way, that whenever you're testing things and want to know too that, okay, how do you know if it works or not, and then maybe that ways of how you want to cause is toward it, you go ahead and form a design like this right here, but then right here, like on the sides right here, that you go ahead and draw these lines right here, and you might say this toward it, like scale lines or something like that. And if you want to go ahead and just like draw like an imaginary line right here, and it thickens toward it, you go ahead and draw this line right here to where it connects right. But a lot of times, like everybody else might say, is that if you were to be scanning that into your phone, and you're warned toward it, this right here, it's a electronic way of how to get your digital references and all that recognized, right? So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you may even think that, like everybody else might say, that it's not really about drawing a masterpiece on paper and trying to get it to where that this right here is another source of identification for a stamp or something like that. But let's just say that if we were to think about that, is to where you go ahead and just draw an example right here, and let's just say that just like something like connected dots or something like that. Like if you have about maybe 18 or maybe 22 dots right here, and let's just say that if you were to be connecting the dots somehow and thinking, okay, whenever you connect the dots like that right there, it's supposed to represent a certain character or something like that. Just for security purposes, can you really identify what this is right here, and what is it that it's doing? So at the time you want to know too that for any reason, like anything about computer generated software, it is about ways of how to identify certain technical thinking, right? And so a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we do speak about security, and then when we do speak about QR codes right here, and it sure seems that way, that the configuration right here would mean is toward a, really, that what exactly is it that this is supposed to mean right here. And like my think is to well, really that the QR code right here is used to be able to identify, that. I'm like, yeah, if you were to scan it in, and it's supposed to produce information based on a website or a coupon or something like that. But you want to know too is that if you were to be, like anybody else would say, is toward it, maybe if they're like, and then I know that most of the time that's usually how it goes to where that whenever a QR code is created, of course it's produced by the program, by a computer, but let's just say that if you were to go ahead and maybe think about a good example for a QR code and actually draw a picture on paper and actually describe it, and you're warned toward, okay, is it really about the fact about that you go ahead and just draw these squares? Some of them could be bigger squares, and then you have right here, like on the top right here, and then you have a few little squares right here on the corners right here. So it sure seems that way that each time we do speak about QR codes a lot of times, and like anybody says, toward that, another way of how to describe an app, though. An app is another way of how do you want to call it, like an application, right? An application that you install on your computer just to be able to have that ability to where you can navigate on your computer screen, at your own ability, at your own time, right? But it sure seems that way that each time we do speak about the QR code right here, and like we say is toward it, really QR code pretty much means is that a QR code, like anybody says, to where it's a code that usually that uses up to 8 digits of lettering, right? But half the time it sure seems that way that anybody might even say is toward it. Well, really, it means to just go ahead and just draw a straight line, straight forward. Just draw a straight line right there. So in a lot of ways, you want to know too that drawing a straight line, and maybe let's just say that if you were to just draw maybe just a few lines right here, and I want to know that you go ahead and just put like these like a lot of times it sure seems that way that like people might even say is that okay, what exactly is that supposed to mean right there? But still. But whenever we do speak about QR codes a lot of times, that is that another way of how do you want to call this toward it? Questions remain, code or something like that. But like we all might even think is toward it. That's not really what how you pronounce it. But it's another way of how do you want to call this toward it's like an electronic stamp that you use just to be able to verify information on a website, just to be able to pull up the digital coupons and all that. But let's just say that if this right here was supposed to be like an electronic puzzle, like if it was supposed to be described as like a puzzle or something like that, to where that you were to go ahead and scan that in, scan this piece right here, using your phone right here, and you were to actually scan it in, and then you'll be able to look up certain information, right? So that's why it sure seems that way that when we do speak about the QR codes, so it's like really that whenever you were first working on maybe something like this, and probably thinking it's okay, QR codes, is that going to kind of remind you just a little bit of maybe rolling a dice or something like that, or is that going to kind of remind you of the fact about okay, you didn't quite know what they were whenever you first start buying a lot of the products and everything that had them, and so it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to QR codes and everything, everybody else might even say is that QR codes is that you pretty much got the idea just by thinking as toward that you go and just draw maybe a few zigzaggy type lines right here, and just think as toward it. Yeah, well, really, what do you think that this is really telling your device whenever it comes to a QR code right here? And I want to know that, okay, yeah, you scan it in to your phone right there, but then on the other hand, it's like, yeah, it's supposed to be another reason for like a type of stamp, right? But it sure seems that way. Like we might even think as toward, yeah, well, really, it's about connecting the dots or something like that. But still. But on the other hand, it's like if this right here is if it's supposed to form any source of shape in principle or something like that. Like I say, is that yeah, but I don't know what this really is supposed to mean right here. But like, let's just say that maybe like a butterfly looking figure or something like that that's recognized on the QR code or something like that. But I just really think though that when we do speak about QR codes though, that it's like that yeah, whenever you do look at them and you're warned toward, okay, yeah, I'm warning. Why would anybody prefer doing this, rather than actually doing it, the cutting, cutting the codes, the coupon codes and everything out of the paper, and maybe if anything back in the old days that you just had to make sure that you had the codes handy. So a lot of times it sure seems that way. That the way the codes used to work, and I'm sure most of us kind of probably remember back in those days that there would be like what you call these barcodes looking square things like this right here, to where that you would scan the code in. Yeah, it registers and all, but still, it's like there would be like a code reader, kind of like this right here, to where that you would have it to where that just scan it in right there, and then you'd scan it in, and then it will be something like to where that, okay, yeah, well, really that the first digits right here, it starts out with 0 0 5, and then 8 A2 A237. So let's just say that usually about 7 digits, something like that. But still, so anybody might even say this that compared to numbers, or compared to just scanning the code in like that, and you want to know too that, yeah, well, which one do you really find easier, maybe more convenient or something like that. But I mean, I really don't know if everybody here really would think that that's really the point of the matter. But still, I just really think that whenever it comes to understanding about QR codes, though, that it's like, yeah, well, really, that whenever you do scan them into your phone, though, that do we think that that's a lot easier than compared to actually cut them out, using a pair of scissors, and actually doing like doing the breaking down the dots, like anybody say is like, yeah, back in those days, it's you would use a pair of scissors. You would use a pair of scissors just to be able to cut along the lines like that, and then you would actually have it to where that you would cut the coupon out like that, and then you'll be ready to use it, right? But now they have it to where you just scan this into your phone, and then you're able to retrieve coupons and certain like plus you're able to go directly to the website and all that. So it's like, yeah, so a lot of ways it sure seems that way, that when we do is speak about QR codes, a lot of times we're warned toward it. Yeah, well, really that can we really look at that as a source of identity toward it whenever you're going to be using it, right? But it's like if you want to go ahead and explain to somebody about something like that, but then if you actually draw it on paper, right? And let's say, yeah, well, drawing on paper for sure, that says toward it. Yeah, well, if you want to give a good example of like maybe a QR code, especially just do like a little design right here, but then maybe go ahead and just draw a few straight lines, maybe on the outside edge or something like that, just to see what it represents. But a lot of times it's like, yeah. And then have right here these measurements right here. So really, that in case if anybody were to ask me that what exactly does this mean right here? What am I, yeah, but that's that right there. I'm like, I actually put those there, and like tell anybody too that if you were to actually put that right there and maybe put one on this corner right here, well, what does that really tell anybody? Anybody who might even say that the first time that you've used this, that you're going to maybe want to know too that I don't know why you put these closing brackets or whichever that they are right there, but I'm like really, in case of anybody that may want to know too that if you're going to be experimenting around with anything, and I want to know that somebody's going to be asking a question about I don't know what this is right here. I'm like you go ahead and let's just say if I was trying to draw, if I was trying to get maybe an idea about what I wanted to use for this side right here. Let's just say if I just draw maybe a few dots right here, and then maybe if I were to just underline them or something like that. And then somebody might say is that, I'm not sure what you were doing right here, but, yeah, okay, I don't know what you mean by that or something like that, but still that. But when we're going to be putting together anything such as maybe a design or any sort of logo, though, and you're always warned toward it that you try to assume about okay, what do you think? This is how the way it works and all that. But like anybody think as to whenever you do work with any source of QR code, really that I'm like yeah, like another way of how do you want to call it is like a type of language, right? So it's like, and let's just say that yeah, 357 8 8 6 0 dash 7 4. So if we were to be, I'm like, yeah, this right here, a code right there, but then all we really had to do is just, of course, was just to scan that in, and that's why it sure seems that way toward it. If we were to be like anybody might even ask me too that if we're talking about writing down the numbers sideways, like if somebody were to say is that okay, if you would go ahead and write 5 and 8 right here, and then 0 1 7 right there. Write that down sideways. So a lot of times it sure seems that way that yeah, well really that write them diagonally or something like that. And anybody might even say is toward it really, is that really going to catch your attention about, okay, does that look really interesting? Or like anybody else who's trying to solve the puzzle though and want to know that yeah, well really that do you think for any reason at all that anybody that might even say is toward it you would maybe use it, maybe if you can remember very well about what you learned about that that experience so far as what you were working on and maybe how you got the idea and maybe about the understanding best about the QR codes and all. But anyway, but the way I think about too that whenever it comes to understanding coupons and all that, but I just really think in a lot of ways that when we do speak about QR codes a lot of times, and I say that yeah, the QR code means this toward that yeah, that does it mean the quarter code or something like that, or something like. But you still, whenever you do scan them into your phone, any of the other device that you have that you're thinking is that yeah, well really that you're able to find them on a lot of the packaging and everything, but still it's like you're warned toward it maybe that if you can tell if it's there or if anybody knows exactly what do you think it's used for. So it's like so each time we do speak about the QR code that you might even think is that it's a number that you can go ahead and write down just for any products that you do buy, that you can go ahead and write down the number, the serial number, any product, see, I guess the CVC or CVS number or something like that, based on the orders and other products that you get. But the way I think about too, though, that when we do speak about QR codes and all that, but really, one thing I did want to mention to everybody here is that when we do speak about numbers, though, that want to know that how many of us would maybe even say is that what is the magic digits here, magic number here, and see 7, put on here 7, 9, 7, 9, 8, 5, 3. So if you write that down right there, and like people might even say is that but you go ahead and write that down diagonally, and why do you think that anybody would think that for any purpose to why you did that, or what you were working with right there, and if you're just trying to solve a math problem or whichever, what exactly is it that you were working with? And so half the time, everybody else might even say is that if somebody finds that really interesting for sure, then people say, well, they'll for sure, let you know about that. But it's like when we do speak about the QR codes and understanding about the mobile apps, it's like, well, I don't even know what that is, but like anybody might even say that, just think about that to where, what the dice, like, if you want to look at it kind of like rolling a dice. Whenever you roll the dice, and then maybe if it lands on a 4 or something like that, but we're also, I'm like, like everybody else might even say that, well, it don't mean that it's not your turn or something like that, but like anybody else might even say that, do you want to kind of look at a QR code, just like dice, or anybody say that, well, you got 2 dice or something, but, still, it's another way of finding for verification on it, but I just really think too that when we do speak about QR codes a lot of times, and you're warned to where if it's supposed to be like a low designed logo for for like kind of like a puzzle, to where you don't really solve the puzzle, but it's another way of how you want to cause us to where that the camp like the reader, the QR code scanner reader needs to be able to, I guess, render or read the label on that QR code, just to be able to identify what its resource is. And so to me, though, it's like, like the resources, and just to identify the resources that's provided. And that's why it sure seems that way, that we might even say is that that the QR code scanner right here, and you're warned to where I don't even know what this is or what that is right there, until that somebody was saying is that you go ahead and locate the code right here, and then they got those devices where they'll be able to scan that in, and then they'll be able to identify what that is right there, what the labels are. But anyway, thanks for watching. Talk about for the QR code right here. I know about number by pieces, but anybody talk about the understanding about the resources about it.